The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air vent and the faint tick of the brass wall clock above the doorway. My uncle's lawyer, a man with silver hair and hands that moved with surgical care, opened his folder. The words hadn't even left his mouth before my Aunt Linda leaned forward, voice slicing through the hush. "She doesn't deserve a penny," she declared, jabbing a lacquered finger toward me. "She was never real family, just a uniform that showed up for photographs." Her words landed harder than any insult on a battlefield. Not because they surprised me, but because of how easily the others let them hang in the air. Her sons smirked. A cousin's phone glowed faintly. The recording app open, waiting to capture my humiliation. I stayed silent, hands folded, posture straight, trained like any officer in a briefing, but my eyes took inventory. The lawyer's fountain pen, the manila folder with a blue tab labeled non-probate assets, a sealed white envelope stamped DD Form 93. Each one, like a round chambered in a weapon Linda didn't know existed. She thought she'd erased me with a sentence. She had no idea the lawyer's next sentence would erase her illusion of control. "So I'll ask you, what would you do if the entire room decided you were worth nothing? Tell me where you're watching from. Hit subscribe," because the words that followed changed everything. My name is Erica, and by the time my uncle passed away, I had been wearing a Marine Corps uniform long enough to know that silence often reveals more than speeches. In my family, though, silence was never neutral. It was a verdict, and more often than not that verdict was delivered against me. Uncle Miguel was the exception. A retired master gunnery sergeant, he carried the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need a raised voice. He wasn't the most affectionate man, but he treated me as if I were a junior Marine who had already proven she could carry weight. He quizzed me on history, made me memorize checklists, and once told me something that became a personal compass. Respect is different from approval. Respect you can earn. Approval, that's just someone's mood. My Aunt Linda never forgave him for that. In her eyes, family gatherings were parades, and she was the marshal. My cousins, her sons, were introduced like decorated athletes, each accomplishment recited as if it were an award citation. When it came to me, the soldier in the family, she would purse her lips and say something like, "Erica's doing that desk work again, maps and coffee." The others would laugh politely. I'd smile back, pretending I hadn't heard the dismissal, but I always cataloged the words like evidence at a crime scene. It wasn't that she misunderstood what I did. It was that she needed me diminished to make her sons shine brighter. Uncle Miguel noticed, of course. He had that Marine's way of reading a room, scanning the corners others ignored. Once, after Linda had made one of her jokes at my expense, he pressed a challenge coin into my palm beneath the table. It was scuffed and heavy, from his last deployment. "Coins aren't for show," he said softly, "they're for what you did when nobody saw. Don't let people with shiny words steal your weight." That was the only validation I needed. But the balance in our family was always tilted. Linda controlled appearances. She managed seating charts, photo boards, even who poured coffee. When I deployed, my absence was treated as an inconvenience. Someone else had to bring the potato salad. When I returned, my ribbons weren't displayed, my stories weren't asked for. My uniform didn't belong in her picture of the family. The humiliations were rarely loud, but they cut sharper for being so calm. Once during a Thanksgiving dinner, she leaned across the table as I was telling a story about a joint exercise in Okinawa. She tapped my hand with a smile and said, "Honey, nobody here understands that jargon. Why don't you let Ryan talk about his new job at the bank?" The conversation pivoted, and I sat back, tasting the bitterness of words left unsaid. Uncle Miguel tried to tip the scales in quieter ways. He'd call me first when he needed help around the house. He'd ask me to drive him to base legal when he updated his will or power of attorney. On one of those drives, he leaned against the passenger window, eyes narrowed at the horizon, and said, "Paperwork keeps people honest when emotions won't. Remember that." I didn't understand fully then, but I remembered. As his health declined, I visited him more. On one of the last afternoons in his hospital room, he waved me closer with a strength that surprised me. From the bedside drawer, he pulled a flat envelope and pressed it into my hands. "Don't open it unless they make you invisible," he whispered. His voice was rough, but his eyes were clear. That envelope sat at the bottom of my bag for weeks. At every family gathering, I felt its weight like a silent ally. I never opened it, never even broke the seal. But I knew one thing. Uncle Miguel had been a Marine too long to leave anything to chance. And Linda, with her fixed smile and sharp whispers, had been maneuvering too long to leave anything on the table. The funeral was held on base, a small white chapel with stained glass that caught the morning sun and cast muted blues and reds over the polished pews. Outside, the flag stood stiff in the desert wind. Marines in dress blues moved with the precision of gears in a machine, every step measured, every salute timed. For me, it was familiar terrain. For my Aunt Linda, it was a stage. She arrived flanked by her sons, a picture of somber dignity carefully arranged for the crowd. She made a point of shaking hands with every officer in uniform, lingering long enough for people to notice. She carried herself like the widow, though she was not. My uncle's actual widow had passed years earlier, but Linda had absorbed the role by sheer force of presence. When I tried to sit near the front, she intercepted me with a hand on my arm and a whisper sharp enough to cut. The immediate family is up front. You'll find a seat back there. She gestured toward the back rows where distant cousins and family friends were already settling. I nodded, said nothing, and obeyed. Marines are trained to pick their battles, and this was not the battlefield. Not yet. From my place in the back, I watched the ritual unfold. The chaplain's voice rose and fell like a tide, quoting scripture, weaving memories into the air. When the time came, the rifle volley cracked through the silence, 3 sharp reports that echoed off the chapel walls. The flag was folded, corners aligned with mathematical precision, and presented to Linda by a young Marine major. She accepted it with a dramatic tremble in her hand, eyes glistening, a perfect image for the cameras. I should have felt anger, but instead I felt the old familiar detachment of analysis. I noted the players, their roles, their words, the casualty assistance officer who coordinated the sequence, the pallbearer's crisp movements, Linda's deliberate glance toward the guests when the flag touched her arms, ensuring they saw her moment of inheritance. The reception was held in the fellowship hall across from the chapel. Coffee urns hissed, and plates of sandwiches sat untouched. The air smelled faintly of lilies, starch, and burned coffee. I stood near a corner, watching. Linda floated from group to group, her sons in tow, retelling her version of Miguel's final days. When she passed near enough, I heard the words she wanted overheard. The estate will finally go to people who sacrificed, not just uniforms that show up at holidays. Her voice carried, just enough for the officers standing near the coffee table to register it. Some shifted uncomfortably, others looked away. I memorized the moment, the tone, the witnesses. Not because I planned revenge in that hall, but because I knew instinctively, optics matter, and Linda's obsession with controlling them would be the very rope she tripped on. I didn't challenge her. I didn't need to. Instead, I observed. The lawyer handling the estate lingered near the doorway, a thick binder under his arm. I saw him glance at his watch. 1400 was the appointment time. Linda intercepted him briefly, gesturing with a manicured hand. I caught only fragments, adjusted time, everyone available. She was maneuvering, even here, trying to control when the words would be read. I kept my distance, sipping burnt coffee, recording the details in my mind as if I were drafting an intelligence report. Who had possession of which folder? Who spoke first? Who stood silent? My uncle had told me once, paperwork is the only weapon that fights back when the room tries to erase you. And today, I could feel the paperwork waiting. As the reception wound down, people drifted toward the parking lot. The afternoon sun was harsh, bouncing off the hoods of parked cars. Linda gathered her sons like a general forming a unit. Her eyes passed over me without stopping, the same way they might scan an empty chair. I felt the envelope in my bag press against my side as I walked out, still sealed, still waiting. A silent promise that when the time came I would not be invisible. The conference room smelled faintly of paper and stale air conditioning. A brass clock ticked above the credenza, each second loud in the hush. The lawyer, Mr. Dalton, silver hair cut close, glasses perched low, arranged his folders with the same care I'd seen officers handle classified files. To one side, Linda sat flanked by her sons, their arms folded, their faces taut with expectation. I sat across, hands folded in my lap, posture straight as if waiting for a briefing. Dalton began with formalities. This is the last will and testament of Miguel Alvarez, dated 2 years ago. His voice was steady, neutral, practiced. The words floated in the air, dry as parchment. He listed small bequests, a few items of jewelry to cousins, household furniture to nephews, donations to a veterans charity Miguel supported for years. Nothing large, nothing contentious, but Linda shifted in her chair, as if warming up for the main act. When Dalton turned a page, she leaned forward. Before we waste time, she said, her tone smooth but edged with steel, let's agree that Erica doesn't deserve a penny. She was never part of this family in the way the rest of us were. She showed up in uniform for appearances, but she wasn't here for him. Not really. The room froze. Even Dalton looked up, startled by her interruption. Her sons smirked faintly, one of them pulling out his phone, as if to check a message but holding it just so the recording app glinting in the corner. I didn't answer right away. Old training told me to hold silence, let it stretch, force others to reveal themselves. The HVAC hummed overhead. My eyes moved across the table, cataloging Dalton's pen clicking once, the blue tab divider in his binder labeled non-probate assets, the embossed seal press beside his elbow. I noted Linda's posture, chin lifted, shoulders back like a commander daring anyone to contradict her. Finally I spoke, calm and even. We'll follow the documents, not opinions. Her smile widened, sweet as poison. Exactly, she thought she had won. Dalton cleared his throat and continued. He read through the rest of the will, personal items, token sums, charitable gifts. When he closed the folder with a soft thump, Linda exhaled like a victor at the finish line. Her sons leaned back, smug, convinced the matter was sealed. But Dalton didn't dismiss us. Instead, he opened the second binder, the one with the blue tab. Now, he said, voice tightening with quiet authority, before we conclude, there are assets that do not pass through this will.
Assets governed by separate documents. Linda blinked. What do you mean? The will decides. Dalton's eyes flicked to me, then back to her. Not for everything. Certain accounts, certain benefits, especially military ones, are dictated by beneficiary designation. They are outside probate. Her smile faltered. That doesn't apply here. Dalton laid a sealed form on the table. Heavy white paper. My eyes caught the header immediately. SGLV 8286, the Service Members Group Life Insurance Election. Next to it, a second envelope, stamped with familiar black letters. DD Form 93, Record of Emergency Data. I felt my pulse quicken, but my face stayed neutral. Intel officers learn early. Never show the win before it's confirmed. Linda shifted again, sensing the ground tilt under her. She opened her mouth, but Dalton raised a hand. We'll address this next, but understand, this is binding, and it may not be what you expect. The silence thickened. The clock ticked twice. I slid a hand into my bag, fingertips brushing the flat envelope my uncle had given me. Still sealed. Still waiting. The room thought I was invisible. The paperwork was about to remind them otherwise. Dalton's hand rested lightly on the white envelope, the kind of gesture that carried more weight than words. He adjusted his glasses and spoke with the slow cadence of someone about to drop a verdict. Some assets, he said, are not controlled by this will. They are governed by beneficiary designations filed directly with the government. They are legally binding, and no court can override them. He opened the envelope, sliding out a single-page form with neat black print and a bold header. SGLV 8286, the Service Members Group Life Insurance Election. My uncle's handwriting was there, crisp and unmistakable. Under primary beneficiary, my name was written in block letters. Dalton tapped the signature line. This form was updated 2 years ago, after his last surgery. Witnessed, notarized, and filed. This is not subject to probate. These proceeds belong directly and solely to Captain Erica Alvarez. The silence in the room cracked like ice underfoot. Linda's chair scraped against the carpet as she jerked forward. That's impossible, she snapped. The will should decide. He would never. Dalton cut her off with a rare edge in his voice. Ma'am, with respect, this is federal law. Military life insurance is paid according to the beneficiary form, not the will. It is ironclad. There is no contest. Her sons exchanged uneasy glances. The smug one lowered his phone, recording app still glowing faintly, as if even he understood the gravity of what had just been said. But Dalton wasn't finished. He slid another document across the table, this one in a thin plastic sleeve. DD Form 93, Record of Emergency Data. It wasn't about money. It designated who would be notified first in case of death. My name appeared there too, in the line beneath other person to notify. Dalton looked directly at Linda. Your brother was deliberate. These forms were updated together, witnessed and filed through base legal. There is no ambiguity. Linda's voice rose, brittle and sharp. He was confused. He was sick. You can't tell me he meant to cut out his own blood. I reached into my bag and laid my own envelope on the table, the one my uncle had given me. Slowly, I broke the seal and slid out the contents. A single photocopied challenge coin, creased from being copied on an old machine, and a handwritten note in my uncle's blocky script. I respect who shows up when nobody claps. Dalton read it, nodded once, then looked back to Linda. This is consistent with his actions. He made his decision intentionally. To contest this would not only fail, but it could trigger the interim clause in his will, voiding your own modest bequests. Her face blanched. The what? Dalton's tone remained even. The no contest clause. If you attempt to challenge, you risk forfeiting even the household items left to you. That is the law. Her sons shifted in their chairs, suddenly calculating. One murmured, Mom, don't. Linda stared at me across the table, her mouth trembling, eyes flashing with a fury that had nowhere to land. For once her words failed her. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I sat straight, calm, hands folded, the way I had been taught to sit when listening to a debrief. In silence, I felt the shift in the room, the weight moving from her to me, from appearances to procedure. Uncle Miguel had planned this ambush carefully. He knew his sister's obsession with optics, with showmanship, and he knew that in the end, the quiet force of paperwork and protocol would cut sharper than any insult. Dalton closed the binder, his final words deliberate. Captain Alvarez, these benefits pass to you immediately. There will be no contest. The clock ticked once, and just like that, the battle Linda thought she had won was already over. The air in the room changed after Dalton closed the binder. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no slammed fists, just the slow recognition of an unmovable truth. Paperwork had spoken, and the rules were clear. Linda was the first to break the silence. We'll contest, she hissed, but her voice lacked conviction. It was the sound of someone throwing a stone at a wall they already knew would not crack. Dalton folded his hands on the table. Ma'am, with respect, there is no legal path. The Service Members Group Life Insurance is a federal contract. It bypasses probate entirely. Even if you tried, the courts would dismiss it immediately. And he flipped back a page. Your brother included a no-contest clause in his will. If you challenge anything, you risk forfeiting the personal bequests you've already received. Her sons stiffened. The older one leaned closer, whispering harshly, Mom, stop. You'll lose everything. Her jaw tightened, eyes darting between the lawyer and me.
So she just gets it all? After everything we did for Miguel? After all the years we were here and she was off playing soldier? Dalton didn't flinch. His voice was measured, each word precise. Not playing. Captain Alvarez served in the United States Marine Corps, and your brother chose, very intentionally, to honor that. These documents make his wishes clear. This is not a courtroom drama. This is procedure. The word hung in the air. Procedure. It was the language I understood better than any. I nodded once. I'll accept certified copies of the documents. I'll also cover advisory fees and taxes to ensure compliance. And I intend to honor a note my uncle left me with a charitable donation. I wasn't speaking to Linda. I was speaking to the record, to the witnesses, to the air that carried weight in a room like this. My tone was professional, devoid of triumph. It was the same voice I'd used briefing officers on intel reports. Clean, factual, leaving no room for doubt. Linda slumped back, her fury curdling into something smaller. She picked up the pen Dalton had placed before her, scrawled her signature on a receipt of notice, and pushed the paper back across the table. Her hand trembled slightly. Her younger son muttered, "It's over, Mom." No one met my eyes. The same people who had smirked when Linda declared me undeserving now studied their phones, their shoes, their coffee cups. The smug certainty had drained from the room, leaving only the quiet efficiency of paperwork being shuffled into folders. When the meeting ended, we filed out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the carpet muffled our footsteps. At the elevator, Linda stepped close, her perfume sharp, her whisper sharper. He was confused when he signed those papers. You know that. I turned to face her fully, my voice steady. The forms were updated 2 years ago. Post-surgery. Witnessed. Notarized. Clean. He knew exactly what he was doing. Her eyes narrowed, fury breaking through the veneer of dignity. But she said nothing more. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open, and she stepped inside with her sons. I remained in the hall, watching the doors close on their reflections. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of her shadow lift. Not because I had defeated her in some loud public way, but because the institution had spoken louder than her pride. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't gloating. It was simply the quiet enforcement of rules my uncle had trusted would protect me. Procedure, not vengeance. And that was enough. When I left the law office, the late afternoon sun hit me like a spotlight. The parking lot shimmered with heat rising off asphalt, and I stood for a long moment, letting the air burn away the weight of that conference room. The battle was over. There were no cheers, no applause, just the quiet certainty of a fight finished by rules rather than voices. Still, I wanted clarity, so the next morning, I drove to Base Legal, the same building where my uncle had sat years earlier updating those forms. A captain in JAG, younger than me, pulled the SGLI statute from a shelf and laid it flat on the desk. He pointed to the passage with a pen. Beneficiary designation is final. Your uncle knew exactly what he was doing. He closed the book, his tone softening. He used the system to make sure the right person carried his respect forward. That respect came with weight. I wasn't interested in flaunting a windfall, or using it as a weapon against Linda. Uncle Miguel had taught me something better. Resources are tools, not trophies. So I made a list, the kind he would have approved of, numbered and orderly. First, I paid off the remainder of my student loans and a small line of credit. Clean slate, no dangling obligations. Second, I set up a scholarship in his name at the local community college, earmarked for enlisted Marines transitioning into intelligence and analysis programs. Quiet professionals who needed a bridge the way I once did. Third, I funded a grant for the unit's relief fund he always supported. Nothing flashy, just a steady stream that would help families cover emergencies without fanfare. The rest I held with caution. Money doesn't erase scars, but it can buy freedom from old chains. That was enough.
On a quiet Sunday morning, I drove out to the base range. The sun was just breaking the horizon, the desert air sharp and cool. I placed Uncle's challenge coin on the shooting bench, the scuffed metal glinting under the pale light. For a moment I just looked at it, remembering his gravelly voice, checklists, then courage. I loaded one magazine, fired slowly, deliberately, each round echoing across the empty range. When I finished, I picked up the coin and slipped it back into my pocket, a ritual complete. As for family, I kept it simple. I mailed a short note to Linda, finalized per designations. I will not discuss further. I wish you well. No threats, no explanations, just closure. Her silence afterward was different from the past. Not the performative cold shoulder she'd used as a weapon, but the silence of someone who had nothing left to say. For me, that was enough. The paperwork had spoken. My uncle's voice carried through it, and I had honored it the only way I knew how, quietly, without spectacle. Looking back, I realized the lesson was simple but sharp. In the military, in families, in life, respect is written into procedure long before it's spoken aloud. My aunt believed that volume could rewrite truth, that if she controlled the optics, she could control the outcome. But my uncle trusted something steadier. Forms filled out on quiet days, signatures witnessed, rules followed. That was his final gift to me. Not just the money, but the reminder that quiet strength leaves the deepest mark. I don't hate Linda. Arrogance is just insecurity wearing a louder uniform. She will carry her bitterness in silence, and that is punishment enough. As for me, I carry a challenge coin, a scholarship fund, and the knowledge that dignity doesn't depend on who claps the loudest. It depends on who shows up when nobody is watching. Quiet doesn't mean weak, it means prepared. Have you ever watched someone's arrogance collapse the moment the real rules showed up? Tell me in the comments, I'd like to hear your story. If this one stayed with you, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss tomorrow's story. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that strength doesn't shout. A new story goes up here every day. Until then, stay steady. And that was the end of it. No shouting, no gloating. Just the quiet power of rules written long before the room tried to erase me. My aunt thought she could control the story with volume. But my uncle left me something louder than her voice, preparation. Quiet doesn't mean weak, it means ready. Have you ever seen someone underestimated until the truth came out? Share your story in the comments below. I read every one. If this story stayed with you, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss tomorrow's upload. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that discipline speaks louder than pride. A new story goes live here every day.